I used to believe that being right was the same as being present, and it took me most of my life to understand the difference. My name is Franklin Turner, and I am 93 years old. And what still stays with me is not the problems I solved, but the moments I quietly missed while trying to solve them. When I was younger, I built my life around certainty. I liked knowing what to do, how to respond, how to fix what was in front of me. People came to me for that. At work, at home, even among friends. I became the one who could be relied on to make sense of things. It gave me a sense of purpose, something solid to stand on in a world that often felt uncertain. At the time, I thought that was enough. I thought being dependable meant I was doing everything right. I remember walking into rooms and immediately seeing what needed fixing, what needed correcting, what needed arranging. I would notice the smallest details, a crooked picture frame, an argument simmering between colleagues, a child struggling with homework. I had answers for everything, or at least I thought I did. I remember the first time I realized someone might not want my answers. It was with my wife, Eleanor. We had been married just a few years, and one evening she tried to tell me about her day. I remember her words, carefully chosen, about feelings I didn't fully understand at the time. I listened, but only long enough to find a way to respond. I offered solutions, suggestions, explanations. I thought I was helping. She smiled politely, thanked me, and went on. I thought that was the end of it. But looking back now, I realized that what she needed most was not advice. She needed me to simply sit with her, to acknowledge her feelings without trying to shape them into something manageable. She needed presence, not solutions. And in my eagerness to be right, to be useful, I missed the point entirely. The same pattern followed me through my life. At work, I was the one people came to when things went wrong. I could organize chaos, offer solutions, correct mistakes. I was proud of it. I believed it made me indispensable. And in many ways, it did. But I also began to notice subtle gaps in my relationships. Conversations felt hurried. Moments felt fleeting. Laughter sometimes edged with an unspoken impatience. I was always moving forward, always thinking about the next step, the next answer. My children felt it too. When they were young, they would come to me with questions, stories, or worries. I would listen for a moment, then respond with logic, with guidance, with the right way to think about things. I believed I was preparing them for life. I thought my role was to protect them, to shape them into people who could navigate the world efficiently and safely. But I see now that sometimes they were just trying to share a moment with me. They wanted me to be there, not to fix, not to solve, not to instruct, but to simply be present. And in those moments, I was often elsewhere, already calculating the next step, planning the next move, believing that my answers were what mattered most. As the years went on, I became even more certain in my role. It was comfortable being the one who knew what to say, the one who could fix things before they grew too large. It kept life moving forward in an orderly way. It kept emotions at a distance, in a place where they wouldn't complicate things. I told myself I was being practical, that I was being responsible, that I was doing my duty. But in truth, I was building a quiet barrier between myself and the people I loved most. I remember one particular evening with my daughter Anna. She was younger then, sitting across from me with a quiet seriousness that didn't match her age. She had come home from school, clearly upset, but she didn't speak loudly or demand attention. I listened, and when she finished, I gave her a clear, logical answer. I explained what she should do, how she should think about it, how it would pass. She nodded, just like she always did, but there was something in her expression, a subtle hesitation, a fleeting shadow of disappointment. that I didn't pause long enough to understand. That moment passed like so many others. At the time, it felt complete. I felt like a good father, a responsible man. But now it feels unfinished. A little space that I never filled with my presence. A quiet gap between us that over time became a small distance in our relationship. Not a chasm, certainly, but a gentle separation that might have been avoided if I had simply been there, fully, without trying to be right. Life has a way of moving forward without waiting for us to notice what we are leaving behind. My children grew up, built their own lives, found their own ways of understanding the world. We stayed connected, of course. There were conversations, visits, shared time. But something subtle had changed, something I could feel but not quite name. There was a distance that didn't come from conflict, but from something quieter, something built slowly by missed moments, by answers given too quickly, by presence withheld in favor of correctness. After my wife passed away, the house became still in a way I had never experienced before. There were no conversations to respond to, no problems waiting for me at the end of the day. Just long stretches of quiet that gave me more time than I had ever allowed myself to think. At first, the silence was uncomfortable. I walked through empty rooms, half expecting her voice, her laughter, her small, gentle ways of making life feel alive. And in that silence, I began to remember things differently. Not the big moments, not the milestones or achievements, but the smaller ones. The times when someone sat beside me, not needing an answer, just needing me to be there with them. The moments I filled too quickly, the silences I tried to resolve instead of share. I began to see a pattern in my life that I had never noticed before. I had spent so much time trying to be useful, trying to be right, that I had not learned how to simply be present. There is a difference between solving a moment and living in it. I did not understand that when it mattered most. I used to think that if I offered the right guidance, gave the right explanation, or solved the right problem, I was being a good father, a good husband, a good friend. But now I see that being good is not always about fixing. Sometimes it is about listening. Sometimes it is about simply sitting, simply existing in the shared space of another person's experience. I recall a winter evening sitting with my son, Michael. He was frustrated with work, with friends, with the small but persistent complications of life. He came to me for advice, and instinctively I began to offer solutions. But this time, he stopped me. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Dad, I just want you to hear me, not to fix it." It was a quiet moment, not dramatic, not emotional in a way that made tears fall, but it struck me deeply. It was one of the first times my children had ever asked me simply to be there, and it opened a window I had kept closed for far too long. If I could go back, I would not try to be less helpful. That was never the problem. I would simply allow more moments to remain as they were, without trying to shape them into something clearer or more complete. I would listen longer. I would sit in silence without feeling the need to fill it. I would let people be heard, even when there was nothing to fix. At 93, I have come to understand that being right can sometimes create a kind of distance, a quiet barrier that keeps you from truly connecting with the people around you. It can make conversations shorter, moments smaller, and relationships more careful than they need to be. And the irony is that in trying to be right, I often miss the truth of what was happening right in front of me. The laughter in a child's eyes, the subtle tremor in a friend's voice, the quiet companionship of someone who simply wanted me to be there. There is something profound in simply being present. It does not require wisdom or cleverness or the right answers. It only requires attention, care, and patience. And yet, it is easy to overlook, to bypass, to forget in the rush of daily life. If you are listening to me and you find yourself always searching for the right words, the right answers, the right way to respond, I would ask you to pause once in a while and consider something else. Not every moment needs to be solved. Some moments are simply meant to be shared, to be felt, to exist without being shaped into something useful. And those are often the moments that stay with people long after everything else has faded. Because in the end, what we remember is not who had the right answers, but who stayed long enough to truly be there, who listened without judgment, who sat in silence without fear, who allowed a moment to unfold without trying to control it. Those are the people whose presence lingers, whose memory brings comfort, whose impact endures far beyond any solution offered, any correction made, any problem solved. I have spent my last years reflecting on this, writing it down, sharing it when I can, hoping that someone might understand it sooner than I did, that someone might realize before decades have passed that life is not a series of problems to fix, but a collection of moments to live, to breathe, to share. And so, as I sit here, 93 years old, I look back not with regret, but with understanding. I see the patterns, the missteps, the good intentions intertwined with quiet oversights. And I see what I can still do, even now. Listen, observe, share, and be present. To offer nothing but attention, and to recognize its value. It is not always easy, but it is simple, and it is enough.